All right. Let me, So great. Thank you for being here tonight to spend the next hour together to meditate, reflect, explore the inner mind. Today's topic is emotion. Emotion is a part of the human life, is it? We can have all kinds of emotions at a different day. Today, you might be happy. On the other day, you might be sad, annoyed, angry, or hilarious. And we have talked about emotion a lot in all kinds of ways across the human history. Because we have been talking about that, it's been an issue. A very challenging issue for many people, and how to control the emotion. However, when we say a word control, it also conveys a sense of the self. It seems that the emotion is something else which is different from me, I, you. So that's why I need to control the emotion. I need to make efforts to avoid, to refuse the emotion. Emotion is there, always there. But what are emotions? What's the relation between the emotions and me? Today, let's look at this part together by meditating, by exploring the mind, the inner world together. This part, this sort of a communication is beyond verse. Of course, I'm using verse to describe it, but the meaning and content is beyond the very limited language. So, look at your mind, observe it now, without any knowledge or experience. Let's look at the mind. That's probably the only way to truly understand the mind. So before we start the session, let's keep silent for a few minutes. You can just focus on breath or reflect how many moments of the day you were not present. Don't judge it. Don't just justify it. Don't condemn it. Just notice it. Then we come back for the discussion of emotions. What are emotions? Emotions are part of the brain, right? Are part of the mind. It can be happiness, anger, dislike, excitement. It can be pleasant, it can also be bitter. If the emotion is a part of the mind, part of life, why do we make a deal of it? Why are we so annoyed by the emotion, which is another level of emotion and thoughts? And among all kinds of emotions, we classify and define some kind of positive or good emotions, some bad emotions. We want to stay with the good emotions, like pleasure, happy, and we want to avoid all kinds of bad emotions, which is probably takes place more often than your environment, in your environment. So there's a division, there's a duality here. That is the good emotions and the bad emotions. And you want to stay with the good ones, while without being affected by the bad ones. That can be an issue, actually, right? It's an issue very similar, all borders on seeking pleasure and avoid pain. Avoid anything painful. We don't like pain, but we want more pleasure. So, for many people, they have placed the focus on emotions, want to find solutions to control bad emotions. But let me ask, is the emotion the crux of the issue of human beings? Or is emotion only the scapegoat of the issues? What's wrong to have emotions? So probably we can look at how emotions arise for most people. Let's look at the relation between emotion and thoughts. If one has no thoughts, what would happen to him or her at this moment?
maybe he would die in this moment.
Die in this moment is not blocked by thoughts. There's a peace, calm, and joy. But what if one is fraught with all kinds of thoughts, which is most people's life, right? One may find that one can be very emotional. We don't judge whether it's good or bad. But I think it is very important to notice, to observe the connection between emotions and the thoughts. Aren't emotions the reaction to thoughts? That very reaction to thoughts disturb the mind. Is it? So, can we say emotions is a kind of a disturbance of the mind, which deprive the mind of the peace and its quietness. So if I say, oh yeah, I need to control my anger, who am I? And who is the anger? What's the difference between I and anger when I have anger? I control the anger, which seems that I and anger are different paths, are different identities. But can we go beyond language, go beyond the confusion resulting from the language? When I have anger, am I not the anger? The whole mind is the anger, isn't it? The whole mind is disturbed, which we call anger. So when I say I want to control the anger, which I develop a new concept, me, which is a division from the whole mind. What's the consequence for that? It only adds to the chaos of the mind. When the mind is disturbed, which we call anger, and we still divide the mind into me and the other. So that's most people's view about the anger, right? With just such a concept of I running through the head to look at anger, to separate the anger from the mind, to separate I from the mind. then I feel more terrible because I dislike the idea of the fact that I'm angry. Which adds to another level of frustration. When one refuses the state of being angry and the fact that he or she is the anger. It is very important to see the whole picture of the skills we created. Of course, what I described can be very simplified, a very simplified version of the skills. But we have done millions of things similar to this. Because what? Because the concept of the self, right? Because the concept of self, one began to refuse some emotions and seek other emotions. Because people want to seek positive emotions and want to avoid negative emotions. But the issue is not about the emotion at all. Not at all. It's about I. Is it? Because emotions are part of the mind. It's a natural state. But the concept I is never natural. It's a concept. People may get confused about the self. People may ask, I as a body really exist? Yes, indeed. You as a body really exist. That's the physical body. But the concept of the self on the mind is only a concept. It's different thing. It's different from your physical body. The concept I, the concept of the self, is what? It's a concept. It's a thought. When you have no thoughts, you still benefit yourself. You still eat, walk, sleep to benefit yourself. Benefit the physical self. But when you have thoughts, the thoughts of me, the ego, what would you do? You benefit yourself psychologically in all kinds of ways. But in reality, you only trigger the chaos of the mind. The self is the only source of all mental chaos. So psychologically, the self does not exist. It's purely made up by the thoughts, by the neuron cells. With this concept of the self, one began to judge, to divide what is good, what is bad, what is good emotions, what are bad emotions. You see, the very fundamental division between I and the mind leads to further all kinds of divisions, because when one has the concept of I one began to be judgmental, to divide all things. Look at this ugly society. Look at this ugly planet because human beings. It's all because this concept, the self, we create war, all kinds of disaster, all kinds of politics, ideologies, all kinds of global warming gas. When you have the ego, the self, you don't know what is beauty at all. You know what you know about beauty is the concept you build up from your consciousness. It's purely some judgment and divisions. That's not the beauty we talk about here. There's a beauty beyond the self. There's a beauty about the life, which is also beyond the self. But if you have the self, the ego running through your head, seeing the beauty is challenging. You can't feel the beauty of the enormity of this immeasurable universe of the mind. Because the self is a center point. Your life goes around. So, back to the emotions. It's not the emotion itself. Emotion is the part of the neuron activities. But because the thoughts of me, the thoughts of I, to interfere with its emotions, which triggers the chaos of the mind. All right, I think we have kept talking about 20 minutes already, so it's time to take a rest. So what's the way to take a rest? Meditation, right? Let's take a 10-minute meditation together to empty the thoughts, to empty the consciousness immediately. Nothing really matters. Thoughts are in any way unimportant to your life. So let's just end the thoughts for a while. And see you guys in 10 minutes. And let's do it now, following the audio guide. Now, let's take a 10-minute meditation. Start by taking a moment to find a comfortable position to sit in a posture that you feel relaxed and get alert. Let hands rest on your knees or laps. Let the eyes close gently. Soften your forehead. Act a soft smile in the corner of your lips. Breathe naturally. As you breathe in, be aware that you are breathing in. Feel the sensation of breathing in. The region can be the nostrils, can be the belly, can be anywhere. Focus on the part you feel most. As you breathe out, be aware that you are breathing out. Feel the sensation of breathing out. The region can be the nostrils, can be the belly, can be anywhere. Focus on the part you feel most. Fix your attention on the breath. Let go of any thought, words, images. This moment, nothing is more important than breath. While you are listening to the bell, check where your attention is. If it wasn't on the breath, after the bell, gently invite your attention back to the breath and sustain your attention on the breath. Slowly bring your awareness back to this room. Feel into your body. Wiggle your fingers and toes. When you are ready, open your eyes. I hope this 10 minutes has given you some peace and quietness. I think with this 10-minute meditation, you have known how to adjust the emotions, how to control the emotions without being an controller. The controlled is the controller. The controller is the controlled. To not be bothered by emotions, one has to look into the mind to understand the totality of the mind, to deeply realize how thoughts are unimportant at all, how ridiculous is the concept of the self. When you negate the importance of the thought, you also negate the self. But what are thoughts? As we have said many times in the past sessions, to recognize the thoughts, to be aware of the boundary of the thoughts in your life requires your attention on the mind, which means that you need a very subtle but also very quiet mind to observe this, to understand how easy the thoughts can be triggered in your life, how easily you are influenced by everything around you, how easy to trigger the self, which then further refuels all kinds of negativities of the emotions. As we said before, emotions is part of the mind, which means that it's part of the nature. It will come, it will come, it will be, it will disappear. Which requires us non-doing. Non-doing means that we don't use thoughts to interfere with this natural state of the mind, which only adds to chaos if we use thoughts. Don't forget, the self is a thought. can you let emotion flower and die? When you want to cry, can you just cry? Let it out. When you are angry, can you observe the anger without being an observer? To deeply realize that at this moment, you are angry. The whole mind is anger. If there were no thoughts, everything will come back to peace naturally. But don't forget, it is thoughts that perpetuates the experience, either bad or good, whatever you define. The thoughts perpetuate continued experience. So, finally, let's come back to the basic question. What are emotions? We also start the session with this question. But what are emotions? Isn't emotion the whole state of the mind? When you understand the mind totally, not in a fragmented way, which is most people's life, but just understand the totality of the mind. With that totality, you are no longer confused about the mind. Without confusion, you have no issues with emotions. It doesn't mean you have no emotions, but you have no issues with emotions. This expression also applies to others. You have no issues with thoughts, but it doesn't mean that you have no thoughts. No issues. In that state of no issues, that's a true peace, is it? You are not bothered at all. That's called no issues. Whether thought exists or not, whether emotions exist or not, I don't care. So I have no issues at all. But again, to be in that state, one has to meditate. Not just meditation, like breath meditation, but to understand the totality of the mind. And that very process of understanding is meditation. So that's all for today's topic. Anyone else want to speak or share something? Or want to have a question to ask, to discuss? It's also fun.
Cico, it's a great talk that you had. I have one. I think isn't it true that you picture a kind of ideal situation that you are not bothered by your thoughts or emotions? Because I think for, yeah, maybe you can theorize about it, but maybe for only a few people, they can go through life without bothering, or am I wrong?
That's a good question, Bob. But we also need to be aware that for that state, it is unimaginable. You can be there, for sure. You can be there. It's not to avoid the emotions, as we said many times. We have emotions, but can we have a state of no issues with the emotions? I will tell you, yes, we can, for sure. But it doesn't mean that we have no emotions. We still have it, but just be with it. Why we can't be with it is all about the self. To meditate means to notice the influence of the self on every corner of the life, which requires us to have a lot of attention on the self at each moment. Because the self cares about the emotions. That's why the self is bothered by the emotions. So the self, the emotion, is all they are both the mind. So do you notice this kind of a inner chaos? So as I said before, I mean probably last month, to meditate is to end the self. It's a state we can't really think. Oh, is that possible? Then we got trapped into another idea. You say, our thoughts are everywhere. When we question that, oh, it seems to be not very possible. That very thinking really put us into the trap. So that's my answer to this.
Great answer, Cico. Thank you.
The thoughts, no, it's everywhere, which requires us to give attention to thoughts at each moment. We don't need to refuse the thoughts, but to observe it. Observe thoughts in all kinds of forms. You know, self is also one form of the thought. As we said before, benefiting the self is a natural phenomenon. Like we eat, you eat, I eat. We benefit the self to survive. That is very normal, common, right? Very normal. But psychologically, benefiting the self only creates the chaos. Have you ever noticed, everybody? Psychologically, benefiting the self only creates the chaos. Even it gives someone some pleasure, but eventually, all ends up in misery. So physically, benefiting the self is there. We can't deny it. But psychologically, can we stop the self? Which means that we need to deeply realize thoughts in any way are unimportant psychologically. You can have thoughts. Of course, I also have thoughts. But I know that thoughts are in any way very, very unimportant. So, including the self. The concept of it. It requires us to take actions. As we do it at each moment.
Sorry, Cico, you say it requires us to take actions in every moment. That means paying attention to your thoughts and emotions, right?
Yes. It won't take us a lot of energies. You don't need to make any effort. So I don't need to make effort to observe it. No, just be aware of that. I think the years of practice meditation has given you the feeling what is awareness, right? Just bring that to your life at each moment. When the thought is no longer bothering you, you have saved a lot more energy. You see, when we are disturbed by emotions and we refuse that state because the self, the ego, we have wasted a lot of energies, a lot of energy. Because this inner chaos, as from outside, nothing happened. From inside, it's the Third World War. So it just take the physical time, not the psychological one. But we need to take actions at each moment. This will drive the change. For this state, the emotions, the thoughts, whatever, it's part of the brain. We should not interfere with it. Just observe it. Don't justify it, or don't condemn it. Don't run away from it. Just say it without being an observer. In that we feel the whole state without being who I am, the self. That's the awareness, which is, of course, very limited for me to convey in languages. But I guess everyone could feel it. Beyond the language. Go beyond the language. Because for most people, the mind is the language. We don't see things, actually. We only see things through words. Oh, what a beautiful day. What a beautiful sky. Actually, I don't see the sky at all. I'm just in the thoughts of the sky when I speak out, what a beautiful day. So, to meditate is to realize the limitation of languages and go beyond it? Can we stop talking? Not this one, not outwardly, not physically, but inside. Because we chat a lot inside. Do we? Can we stop chattering inside? Chattering means that we still think in words, in languages. Can we stop doing that? The very process of doing that is meditation. It doesn't mean that you don't need to use language. You, of course, use, right? We use it all the time. No, we use English. But whenever unnecessary, can we stop talking inside? Can we try to stop talking? Not limited by words, to feel, to perceive the universe. Perceive a tree, perceive the sky. Not through words, but through our senses. The sense of the body, the sense of the mind. To discover a beauty from a different dimension. It's not a beauty from the thoughts concocted by words, but a beauty which is beyond words. It's a beauty from the moment we are part of the nature. So practically, what we can do in life is be aware of the self. Notice how the self is triggered by all kinds of things, by like arguments, by other people's comments, by the thinking in terms of benefiting yourself. Psychologically, I mean, by wanting, craving, all things, we need to notice it. Notice that how easy the self can be triggered. When you don't care about the self, do you care about the emotions? When you care about emotions, you defend the self. Self-defense. It just requires us to take practice at each moment. We can also say in this way, when you have no thoughts at all, there's no self at all. So, simply speaking, empty the consciousness immediately. Die to this moment. If you die to this moment, yourself also die with it. Then, do you still care about emotions? You don't care. Right? You don't care at all in that moment. So let's keep doing that together, everybody. Die to each moment. Empty the consciousness. See the totality of the mind. Take actions. Only then we can take actions to change our situation, to change the life. Joyce, do you want to speak something?
Actually, I'm thinking about. So, do you think animal has emotions? So we can see, for example, dogs or cows or birds. Sometimes you can see the photos or pictures. They are hugging, and the parents are taking care of the kids. And sometimes cow can cry. Um, so I'm thinking. So if you said emotion is reactions to self. Um, how should we understand the emotions of animals?
Oh, that's a very good question, Joyce. First, I'm not a dog, so I don't really know how dog express emotions. But even when we have no self, we can still have emotions, right? And I think thoughts is part of the mind, the brains, the neuron cells. So can we maybe dog also have thoughts, right? Because dogs also can recognize people, recognize his master. And what are thoughts? Thoughts are the response to memories. So in that sense, when the dog see the master, the dog can be very happy. Maybe that's also because of thoughts. Because the dog see the master and there's a thought about the master immediately. And then there's a happiness from dog in reaction to that thought. This only my postulate, I don't know.
Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome, Joyce. You see how tricky it is to discuss emotions by verse. No matter how we discuss here, it's only a model framed by verse. Even what are emotions? If we really go into details, we may don't know at all what are emotions. Because if we discuss thoughts by verse, we are always in the domain of thoughts. Thoughts are always fragmented. Thoughts are always limited. So if we talk about this part only in thoughts, we can't go beyond it. And thoughts themselves creates all kinds of conflicts. And can trigger emotions. So we can be emotionally talk about emotion. And in a way, we are disturbed by these conflicts of thoughts, which we are into a new level of emotion. So words are always limited. And also forgive my ignorance. It seems that I'm very talkative in the session, but I have to admit I'm very ignorant. Much more ignorant than you think. Truly. But because this ignorance, we could appreciate the body and the mind for this wonderful and enriched experience. So we can appreciate life. Appreciate everything. All right, I think it's time to say goodbye. But before do that, let's keep silent for 3 minutes to quieten the mind again before we leave here. Shall we? Slowly open the eyes. So it's really great to have you all here together. Spend the last 1 hour exploring the mind. Thank you for listening to what I said. But what I said is not the authority forever. I'm not the authority of the mind. It is you that observe your mind by yourself. It's a journey by yourself. It's a long journey. Delve into it. Understand yourself. Enjoy the richness, the beauty of this empty world. I hope everyone could practice, if we can call it practice, at each moment, without any effort. Empty the consciousness immediately. Die to this moment. See the totality of the mind. And I believe you will take very, very sensible actions. This action is now beyond your thinking.